Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to our perinatal data webinar today, Maximizing PeriData.net, Working Smarter Every Day. My name is Eva Fastbinder-Brummel and I'll be moderating the session today. This session is brought to you by the Wisconsin Association for Perinatal Care, WAPC, and our contact information is there for your reference. We want to thank our activity planners today who helped put this session together, put this content together for us. Our faculty, we welcome Alan Cooper, who is a partner at Ancilla Partners in Milwaukee. Also his colleague Madison Fueling, project coordinator at Ancilla Partners in Milwaukee, and Lisa Locken, a clinical nurse specialist for Ascension, St. Joseph, and Elbrook Memorial in Milwaukee. And we want to make sure that you see the notice of disclosures if you do choose to get continuing education credit. This is one of the requirements that we do present this to you. And before we begin, I want to let you know you are in listen-only mode unless you raise your hand. So please note that hand icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We do encourage you to ask questions by speaking directly to the presenter using your phone or computer microphone. If the presenter asks any questions of you, the audience, during the presentation, please go ahead and raise your hand to answer that question. You can also ask or answer questions by typing them into the question field. So I or Lisa or Alan will communicate those questions and answers to all of you in the order we receive them. If you don't see the question pane, just expand your screen by clicking the orange arrow in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If we don't get to your question due to time constraints, WAPC staff and the speakers will respond via email when we're done with the session. If you have any questions, just email them to that email address there, to the WAPC@perinatalweb.org. If you're having technical problems, trouble with hearing, trouble with seeing the slides, please email or call Barb directly at the office. She is waiting to help with any of those sorts of problems. And so our course objective today, by the end of this session, you will be able to identify 3 sources of data in PeriData.net that you can use on a daily basis. Okay, and with that, I am going to turn things over to Alan and Lisa.
Okay. First, I just wanted to say, why is using PeriData.net important? I have an attestation here from someone that I work with where PeriData is highly valued data repository for the OB service line. We use it for a great number of initiatives and projects. So again, it's not just something that sits out there, but it's alive and breathing and used every day. Next slide, please. And what I'd like to say is we're talking today about a day in the life, or, well, maybe a week, but in any sense of the word, again, each of us owns our own data. It's our service line and it's our information. A variety of people may put it in, but we own it and are responsible for it. So I want to make sure that today we cover some information about input, efficiency and accuracy, output, what can you get out, does it make clinical sense, and again, checking on it often because nothing should come as a surprise. And you need to know your own resources and connections, both within PeriData.net as well as other departments and other reports that you may use in conjunction with this. And as we get started here, I'm going to turn it over to Alan, who's going to talk a little bit about efficiency of data entry and maximizing the input side of things.
Thank you, Lisa. So we get started, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the kind of our landscape of the process of how to get the information, you know, from your systems and from your processes and your papers all the way to PeriData, and then kind of how the information then gets digested through our reporting system. So as you can see, most people that use PeriData kind of understand this. Those that are kind of newer to it may not understand, and that's kind of why we kind of present a higher level of kind of how the information gets flown into PeriData. You know, starting to the top, you know, we actually have an automatic feed coming from the state SIVERIS application that every time you do enter a piece of information into Sybaris, it actually does feed into PeriData within a few minutes. Another avenue that people have used to get data in there is doing extracts out of the EHR, which is common, and then either they generate a birth worksheet automatically, or they actually have a report that comes out of their system that they then manually enter into PeriData. One of the more newer areas within the last year or so is either having an extract coming out of EHR that creates a CSV report based on our kind of templates, or people can actually leverage our template manually if they find efficiency in actually getting the data into an Excel spreadsheet and then leveraging the data upload to get into PeriData. And then ultimately, those that are interested in the reporting aspect of it then leverage Pentao at the moment to actually look at the summary and detailed reports. So some of the tips to improving your workflow, so kind of understanding how the data gets into PeriData, we understand that sometimes it becomes challenging and time consuming, so we're trying to find many opportunities to try to improve on that efficiency. So the first thing we'd recommend is if you find that you are struggling in your hospital to actually get the data into PeriData in a reasonable amount of time, we recommend that you actually contact us directly at Scylla through the help desk to find ways that we can help you, whether it's actually understanding your workflow in general, and maybe there's efficiency in that, or just seeing what we can do to help you guys get the data out of your system, and maybe possibly even leveraging some of those avenues such as the CSV import to get it into it. Also, if you do have IT resources available, which some do and some don't, but for those that are fortunate to have some of the availability, we'd recommend working with them to see how we can leverage them to actually get either reports out of your system more efficiently, or even again leverage the CSV import. And this kind of goes into it in general. So if you are interested in leveraging the CSV import, as I stated before, talking to your IT people and connecting them with us so we can make sure that they can provide the appropriate extracts out of the system, that's usually the best avenue. Some actually have dedicated report writers within their department that can help out as well. Either way, you have up to about 80 or 90 fields that we can support at the moment, that if you have the ability to get that out of your system and you don't have to manually do that, we definitely recommend that. We also provide versions that can be customizable to your hospital if it makes it easier for you to get the data into our PeriData system. Some other things that are outside of the electronic version of trying to get the data from your EHR or similar into PeriData, those that don't have that ability, at least initially, we do try to find ways to, again, provide efficiency in play. So some of the things that we call sanity checks, to ensure that you're not, when you're entering in data into the actual forms on PeriData, the application itself, we don't want you to have to constantly revisit fields that may be entered in incorrectly. So we try to provide some pop-up screens to let you know that, whether age or weight or possibly certain vital records are not exactly appropriate. So as an example, we have a few blood pressure fields that vital records would come through, and then you put in a number that is not exactly the same that makes sense. We will highlight that to you so you can right away adjust, at least review what you are entering in screen versus what's done in vital records to ensure that you're not having going back a few days later. Another example is just if you have age or weight or et cetera that does not make sense. Like if the weight is like at kilograms or grams that are just too high, or age is, that is not appropriate either, we will highlight those things with a pop-up screen saying, are you sure? Again, trying to provide that instant feedback to create some efficiency. Other areas we try to do is auto-populate based on other data elements you enter in. So if you enter in a piece of data in one screen, that triggers something to be entered for you on another screen automatically, these are some examples of that being done. Some other efficiency that either is currently in production or will be in production in PeriData in the first quarter next year. One is what we did is, and some of the screens that you see when you enter the data are kind of long in nature, race being one of them, and we kind of condensed those fields down to a point where a race field is really just a drop down to select multiple values that support the race field. And there are other options, like when we have an other selected for a particular data point, that we don't show those extra other screens or other fields that don't exactly make sense if you don't choose those values. That's an example. Some other things that we're going to be doing, hopefully releasing early part next year, is the whole manage your own measures, basically. So some hospitals aren't able to actually monitor all the measures that are offered within PeriData. And sometimes what we call hospital required fields become overwhelming and sometimes, in their opinion, unnecessary. So we're actually providing a feature which we'll be communicating in the next few months, as well as the ability for you to select your hospital measures that are important to you for your hospitals, and then only those fields will be highlighted as those that are considered required. Finally, we're going to attempt to get up in the Q1 of next year is the ability to bring back the standard reports, or what we call standard reports, but just reports in general that are non-ad hoc, back into PeriData, so you can actually go inside of PeriData, not have to log into Pentaho and generate reports. You essentially can just go in PeriData, stay there, not have to log in, click the reports, and stay in that same application. So we're excited about some of those things because we, again, understand time is the essence in this area. The one other report that we did release in the last, half of this year, and we just continuously improve it, is called the Field List Report. And the whole point of this report is to provide all the users the ability to understand what are the fields that are actually out there, what are some of the definitions, where can they actually find these fields within the screens in PeriData, and also which fields actually are relevant for any given report. So you know that if, for whatever reason, some of your information, whether it's considered excluded or not in some report measures, you can go to this field list report to actually identify, by filtering on, which of these fields are actually impacting this particular measure and this particular report. So it's a very key report. The other thing we added this year as well was, not this year, but in the last month or so, was the ability for you to go to a field and say, where is this particular field in the data extract report? The detail extract report is very large. It has almost 800 columns that you can choose from, and this report will help you identify exactly which column you should look at. This field list report is actually out in the Penthouse area, as located here. I was going to quickly show a demo. I may actually defer on that. Mainly, it's just looking at what the field list report is, and what I could probably do. Well, I think I'll hold for that and maybe show it later if we have time. The other area is VAUGHN, the Vermont Oxford Network. Those that are participating in VAUGHN at the hospitals, some have direct connects to VAUGHN where they can actually submit their data if their IT is able to actually create the connections. Some hospitals, however, aren't able to do that, so they still leverage what they call their eNICU application, which I think is a client application on the computer on the hospital side that actually collects the data information. They can hit send or go from that application that actually submit on their behalf to VAUGHN. What we did to help out that process is provide a report or an extract report out of PeriData that you can actually extract out of PeriData. It'll give you all the information you have, and then you can actually import it into NEQ, and that'll hopefully help you save you time. If anyone on this call is actually leveraging VAUGHN and don't have a direct connect to VAUGHN, we'd recommend you contact us if you want to, for us to help you get through this process. Other potential future efficiency, the Cerberus, what we're doing there is the current process of accepting and rejecting Cerberus information. That's the integration point to PeriData. We want to try to see if there's opportunity for things just to pass through if they are updated in Cerberus without having manual intervention. And so that'll be kind of a mini project that we'll probably be doing early next year. We also recommend you contact us if you are creating your own reports and you're a lot of manualness on your side and you believe that it'd be a lot easier for us to create it on your behalf and then just access inside of PeriData. We can do that for you, so definitely get in contact with us related to that. And some other quick things related to a grant that we received for WAPC and WISPIC as the Opioids Project, which will help in some areas with possible direct interfaces to hospitals, those participate, and then also offering a quick entry form, which hopefully will speed up the process of entering of some of the basic information. So this is the same flow as I stated before. This is the blue is the potential of what I spoke about already of things and opportunities to help again the efficiency of getting the data and also just an efficiency of actually leveraging the PeriData system. And that's a lot to do with some of the getting the reports back into PeriData. Quickly, just other considerations that are not exactly related to the data portion, but it's really about the security and to ensure that, you know, as you bring in new users and entering the data, we find that it's always good to have a backup person. And a lot to do with that is just be able to transition the knowledge of how to use PeriData and how to get the data in there and actually how to get the data back out. So these are just some tips that are recommended that you do, whether you're new or just in general, some good best practices to ensure that your hospital is supported on an ongoing basis. And then finally, just another best practice, security management in general. We recommend that you constantly, you know, whether it's quarterly or biannually, review your current users, ensure that the ones that are still active are appropriate and the ones that may have left the hospital are disabled. A lot of that just relates to good practice, HIPAA standards, etc. And then in terms of creating new IDs, we recommend, you know, some good practices of leveraging their employee ID or similar as their login, because that typically creates some uniqueness when you create an actual user. With that, I will pass on how do I maximize use PeriData to Lisa.
Okay, hopefully you can see that coming on through. So in your daily work life, what are you trying to do? Again, as I said earlier, it's your service line. Remember, you know, why do I have to report stats to regulatory agencies? Why do we show information to providers and administrators? So what? The so what of all of it is that it makes a difference for our patients and families. And what we do not want to happen is have a black hole of information, meaning that it goes in somehow and suddenly it's never pulled back out again. Again, it needs to be used once it goes in there. And yes, your data does matter, but again, you have to do something with it. And it does have to be trustworthy. It has to make clinical sense. And again, we need to use it to make a difference for our patients and families, whether it's a quality issue, cost, so on and so forth. That's why we're interested in all of this information. Another very important thing is we need to know our own information before anyone else does. I've heard more than once about someone saying, I was in some meeting with administrators and up on the screen pops us our stats and they're red because we're failing on some measure or another. Well, none of this should come as a surprise to you as stats come out, because somehow you need to work into your process with your teams, making sure that it's looked at ahead of time, that people are all aware of it, and that we can clean it up before it goes somewhere else. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about cleaning up data. Someone does need to do this before it is put out and turned into information and sent to others. I think you need to take a look at that what's in there is correct. some of the things I'll show you are field mismatches, missing information for calculations, and then certain outliers. Are they really outliers or aren't they? And this last point is, I say, team up and true up with other data sources and other departments. Again, no one place of information is always completely accurate and pristine. And I know of the high-performing areas where they have teams together, whether it's in the service line and in quality and in HIM, registries, et cetera, that work together in order to make sure that their information is accurate. As a true story, I will say that certainly coding can be just as erroneous, if you will, as anything that might be in PeriData. And when I've gone to true up information, say on early elective deliveries and things like that, it's probably just as equally possible that something might be in error on the coding side versus on the PeriData side. So by looking at all of this, we can go ahead and make course corrections very early on and get our information to be trued up and accurate. What couple of ways to do this are quick glance, for example, on summary reports. Does that information on there look to be reasonable, and or what needs attention? So again, you want a clinician probably of some sort to look at it because we can start to take a look at, gee, that makes some kind of clinical sense, or holy man, that is way out of whack, that can't possibly be right. We also have ways to look at patient level detail to find certain outliers. And again, what will help with that is to find, okay, here's where my inaccuracy or here's where I need to go check a particular chart to see if in fact the information that's on there is correct. So here's an example of a checkpoint summary sheet. Don't pay super lot of attention to this. It came out of our Ancilla test environment, so it won't look clinically correct completely. But what I'm showing here is that we had a total number of 37 mothers in this time period, and as I take a quick look, oh good, no early elective deliveries, that could be pretty good. But then I look at a couple other things. Infant complications, are you kidding me? 2 out of 2? Now I can figure out there could be 2 issues. Number one, there's only about 10% of the records are in there. So I already know that there's not very much information in this time period that's going to allow me to really know if I should go after these numbers or not. They're not done entering the data for this time period. Number 2 might be, okay, if I've got these, I'm going to need to maybe go look at a detailed report to find out who are those 2 that are showing up, and is that in fact correct. Again, same thing down here on this exclusive breast milk feeding. We just plain don't have enough records completed here to make it worth our while to go in and check. So on a report like this, it can be helpful to see how many are in there. And when Alan was talking about what those so-called hospital-required fields, as they're called right now, again, it's all the fields necessary in order for it to be able to properly calculate out who's in and who's out of a particular report that's there. One other thing on things like checkpoint summary and other things that tend to get publicly reported out. When we're looking at the date range in question, what we're looking at is what calculation is happening behind the scenes. And in the ones that go out publicly reported, we're actually going by the patient's date of discharge. So that does have to be in order for it to be counted in there. We have other internal reports, like maybe delivery summary information that's on the day of the baby's birth, but some of these external ones are by date of discharge, and that is because that's how the regulations read. Another thing about field mismatches. I do this in a number of places. One nice one that we have now is on the WISPIC patient level detail report. We do have a way to be able to do mismatches for chronic hypertension and for gestational hypertension. So if we have something put in the vital record field as, for example, a no, but then I have a yes for somebody who has chronic hypertension with superimposed preeclampsia, I know that I need to go in and correct that vital record field to be a yes for chronic hypertension. Similarly for gestational, somewhere this person has a yes marked, and then if I were to keep going to the right there, they don't have anything marked for gestational, so that would have to go in and be corrected. So that's the way to do that. I also look for field mismatches frequently, for example, on who's the primary care provider versus the attendant, and does it make sense that they're in the group together, or they might have been on call coverage, that type of thing, because it doesn't always make sense. We also then have outlier checks. This I often use for things such as early elective deliveries or anything else where you're trying to figure out whether something is in fact happening or not. And in this case, what we're looking for is, it seems like we do have a case where something fell out. So what we can go and do is check this mother's medical record number. Just go look at this case and find out whether in fact it is an outlier or if we had a data entry problem. One thing I often find for this is, for example, it may be that she did have cholestasis of pregnancy as an indication for the delivery, and under liver biliary, sometimes people mark yes rather than yes at delivery. The reason it needs to be yes at delivery is because she could have had some other problem like her gallbladder removed earlier in the pregnancy, but then not really have a problem at delivery. And we're looking for something that would be an indication at the time of delivery. So you can go ahead and use this patient level information in order to go check whether you do have an outlier or not. Now, when we actually use data in daily work, I'm going to talk about three main areas. Service line reports of different sorts. Oftentimes those go out to administrators, providers, sometimes insurance carriers, and then certainly public reporting. Also, oftentimes you can answer questions on the fly. And then finally, a little bit on quality reviews. For those who are interested, next time we're going to do a deep dive webinar on a specific quality review. But in general, you're looking at where are your targets, how do you compare to others, and what are your trends. So how about some service line reports? Again, we have summary reports that are aggregated for time periods. They usually have numerators, denominators, percentages, or rates, that type of thing. So they're kind of pre-calculated out for you. And then we also do have a whole number of patient-level reports, which gets to each record that's involved. Some of those are pre-made, and some of those you can make on your own. I do have just a little screenshot here of report files. So you can see that we have, under reports in general, we have all these different files off on the right-hand side here. And then we also have folders that contain sub-reports within our sub-files within those folders. So you can get yourself familiar with those if you are not already. Here is an example of detail files where you have summary reports of different kinds that can be done by attendant, by facility, by OB provider, and then also a detailed report. Just a couple of these, some you may be very familiar with, others not, depending on what you use regularly. This is an example of just the delivery summary. So again, it's got counts and then percentages, and it tells us how many babies and how many moms. The newborn summary has a couple of pages to it. The first page is listing out births by plurality, births by gestational age, and then also by birth weight. And then down below has a lot of additional baby information, like where the babies were admitted to, whether they went out for another facility. We've recently added, for the inborn babies anyway, early deaths out of the NICU, which gives you a rate per 1,000. That can be helpful, especially in some of the, maybe some of the bigger centers, but on a baby where you're just doing some palliative care and they're never actually admitted into a nursery. And then over on the right is all the information on breast milk feeding. Another one, kind of a canned summary report that I wanted to show you was the quality indicators report. Again, this can be a way to get some quick at-a-glance information. A couple of the newer things on here are HIV tested and HIV positive. Again, pay no attention to the numbers. It's more for a example today. But hopefully all of your people tested is sitting up there near 100%. And then whether there were any moms positive. Another thing we recently added, again, as we get into more internal quality improvement work, is hepatitis B vaccine within 12 hours of birth for babies whose moms are positive or unknown, the HBIG, and then also within 24 hours for all other babies. That's the newer CDC recommendation. So that's on there. As we continue on with operations, a lot of times delivery data is run monthly and distributed to a whole host of people. Department chairs present them at monthly meetings. I think that's pretty common in most places. So we can also then look at some template reports and provider stats that are useful for your daily operations as well. This is an example of a template report. We have some screenshots down here at the bottom. On the main data entry part of your screen there's a section that does have the template reports and descriptions, and you can feel free to use this at any time. What the data committee tried to do was start to get information that might be kind of common for people to want to take a look at, and then put it into these different tabs so that you can load in your own information for your time frames and see what you have. So this one happens to be a list of births by primary care providers, and it's getting us some patient level information. So if we want to see, we could probably then sort this. If I want to see John Johnson's patients and what route they delivered and who the patient was and so on, we can do that. Another thing, a pivot table starts to do counts, and that's run off of the detailed data information, and it starts flipping it into a nice count table. So I was talking about John Johnson before. He had 2 patients who had cesareans. In this little slot of time, that's all he had. But the clinic had 1 spontaneous vaginal and 1 vacuum. So you can see how this can be another very useful way to run data. That concludes the kind of standard type report information, and then a little bit more on the fly, as I call it, which is just somebody would like some information, usually kind of out of the blue or needs something kind of quick. So you can use those templates that I just described or the detailed data extracts. And again, if we use a comprehensive detailed data extract, that's all those data fields that Alan was mentioning. The condensed DDE has a lot of the information you may need, and it runs more quickly because it's not pulling quite as much stuff. So you might want to try that one first, but if you're looking for something a little less common, the comprehensive one is a little bit better. Here's some examples of things that I've pulled out, and you may have other things similar that you've had to have done. Day of a week that deliveries occur, maybe somebody's wanting to get some stuff for staffing and scheduling or when to maneuver things around. They might want to know that. We can get information on the postpartum length of stay. Your other data systems can really only get the entire patient's length of stay from admission to discharge. We can get things like how long was the actual postpartum length. I just last week had to run some information for somebody who's needing to submit for Baby Friendly, and was able to do that real quickly by looking at a couple of different reports that they needed. And oftentimes, I know here, we're looking for attendance, clinic volumes, that kind of information. For example, not too long ago, we had a newer physician that needed some information for boards, I think, as far as how many types of deliveries they had and so on. And I was able to run that for them very quickly. So again, on the fly, the detailed data extract is often a very good bet for you. And you're looking at what's your clinical question. I'm going to show a couple things about putting filters on the top row and just showing you pivot tables. We're not going to go into great detail on that today, but just to let you know that it is available out there. So first of all, what a lot of people do is they'll bring down a detailed data extract. And again, as Alan mentioned, we have all these things with all these column numbers, and it goes out to, triple letters off to the right. What many people do then is they add the filter on the top row there. So they go up here, grab the filter thing, and make sure that there's filters on all those columns there. And then maybe go start to look at a particular column that they're interested in filtering by, and or a couple filters that they're going to use. But that helps them then find out the information specifically that they're looking for at a given time. And as you can see, this is all patient level detail, so if I need to go back to the chart to find it, I can readily know which patients I'm looking for. So rather than looking for 180 different ones, I see, oh, these 3 are the ones I need to go check on. And again, if I'm working with a pivot table, as I've got the same stuff pulled down here, they can go over here into Insert Pivot Table and bring down a pivot table example. Now what I've done here is we're looking at parity and route of delivery. One of the best things you can do when you make a pivot table is find the count of distinct births. That is going to be able to give you the numbers. So whether the woman had one baby or more than one, you're not going to jam up your numbers. So I would suggest that. And then we did the nullipara multipara as something we wanted in the row, so you can see that here. And then the column was the final route of delivery. So we had cesareans and so on. And again, having it be fake information, it was giving us some goofy stuff on the pivot table. More examples of what to answer on the fly are an insurance company needs some information quickly. Maybe you're doing a request for proposal and you need some information on statistics, things like that. Grant funding, rapid response to execs needing information immediately. So for example, gee, we're seeing that I got 3 physicians retiring pretty soon. What kind of volumes do they have? Or maybe conversely, we just hired in a couple of new docs. What kind of volumes are they producing now or in the last period of time? So those are a whole host of things that can be done on the fly. And then finally, quality reviews. I'm going to go over some of this kind of quickly. And again, for those who will be participating in the webinar next week, we're going to go into this in quite a bit more depth, but this is sort of an overview of a couple of things for quality reviews. I'd like to remind you that we do have a state aggregate report. The aggregate report is basically the delivery summary information with a variety of comparisons. So you can compare your facility to other like facilities, such as the number of births that you guys have in a year. You can compare yourself to neonatal nursery level of care, who all in the state who has a similar level of care, and what are their stats like, and then also by WAPC region. And on all of these, you're also comparing yourself to the state. This can be kind of helpful to figure out, are you guys running at kind of the same rates of people around the state, or better, worse, whichever. So here is an example of an aggregate report. This was by, since I'm in the Southeast region, it was pulling out of the Southeast region. So this first column is what's your facility, and then with you and everyone in your comparison group for this particular time period. And then if you weren't in there, would it look much different? So for example, if you're a pretty big place and others are smaller, you might be contributing an awful lot to that number. And then what it's doing is then looking at all the rest of the state together and how do you guys compare. So again, this could be, it's from a kind of a weird time frame, but in this case, the vaginal births at 77% and the C-sections at about 23%. And then when you actually compare that to the whole state, it looks like this place is a couple of percentage points lower on their C-sections. So that could be useful for you to know. Also, VBACs, it looks like they had a considerably higher successful VBAC rate than perhaps across the state. So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the number of births in the state. And in this particular example, it's facilities with between 501 and 1,000 births per year. So you see this is a little bit different comparison number. And it's got the same information running across here. So for example, all PeriData.net hospitals, these numbers should be the same. But then how this place compares up could be a little different. They're a little bit, oh, I used different numbers. No wonder they don't look exactly the same as before. But you could then see how they compare with their VBACs. Wow, 100% success compared to 60 in this time frame. So that's another way that you can take a look at it. So that can give you maybe a starting point for something that you want to do with comparisons to let you know what's going on. A number of other things that you can do just in general, quality improvement projects that we've done. You guys may have other examples of things you've done, but maybe there's some quality improvement projects that your physicians want to do or residents or whoever. VBAC rates compared to, we had one in the clinic compared to our department as a whole. Our house cases getting HIV testing, you know, they come in on the fly and did we get that ordered? Different variations in pain management. Data, we often use it at our place for each rotation of residents to provide them with amount of deliveries, procedures performed. It also gives the residents a chance to do some beginning work with quality improvement because that is part of their residency program. Some other clinical examples for things to do for QI are things like choreo, palliative care, matching APGAR scores to route of delivery or weeks of gestation. We've done a lot of nursing shared governance and quality projects, especially around breast milk feeding. One of the things I do want to point out is that as PeriData.net continues to grow and mature, as it were, there's more things that we are putting in here that I would say are useful for QI type improvement. So for example, with breast milk feeding, skin to skin is now available in PeriData.net. So for example, as if I'm on the nursing units, I don't have to do a completely separate audit of that and have separate people doing extra work with that. If it goes in at the beginning, right, when all the other data is entered, and or if you've got it eventually, hopefully we can get that on a CSV poll, that allows it to come straight in, and then you can use that information along with all the other information that's in PeriData to start answering questions about what you have regarding some of these different quality measures. Another thing with these reports that I want to mention is, for example, we do have the reports called WISPIC reports. And again, we would love to have your facility participating in the WISPIC projects, but you do not have to be participating in them to be able to use the report. Summary and detail reports, and we have just divided the detail reports into hypertension and breast milk feeding so that you're able to kind of separate those out a little bit better now. So I'm going to show you some of the screens that are involved in the WISPIC report. It is 4 pages long, and it starts with hypertension. So we have hypertensive moms, length of stay for vaginal deliveries, and all length of stay. And then they're divided out by what type of hypertension they had. Different groups may want to focus their attention on particular patients, and then when they go into the detail report, if they really want to focus on, okay, I'm most concerned about people with severe features, and if they weren't staying at least 72 hours for monitoring, I want to go see what's going on with that population and work through it that way. So this can give you an idea of how to do something like that. We also have added in there now the antiplatelet therapy, meaning who had low-dose aspirin in the pregnancy. The second page has severe maternal morbidity for those with hypertension or without, who is going into the ICU or needed transfusion of a lot of blood products. We also have the hypertensive emergency things, which are so critical, meaning if she had severe range hypertension and then was she treated within an hour after it was discovered. We also have some information on NICU admissions, so babies who are exposed to hypertension, how many of those went to NICU compared to all comers. And then it moves down into the breast milk measures. We have skin to skin immediately after birth, all deliveries, vaginal and cesarean, and maybe they had skin to skin but not immediately after birth, same splits. And then we go on to skin to skin for procedures, rooming in 23 hours per day, again by delivery type, separation and pumping. Exclusive breast milk feeding, that's the usual PCO5, but we also have it based on mom's preference. And then for those that have neonatal intensive care units, if the baby was still here at day 28, did he get any breast milk? So those are all the different things that are on that summary report. But I wanted to let you know, if you weren't aware of it, that it does contain a lot of good information, and it can be very useful, again, for you in QI work. So I am now going to actually, there will be an assignment, believe it or not, but I would love to have people ask any questions that they might have, since between Alan and myself, we seem to have talked very, very quickly. So it was probably kind of a lot to absorb here, but if there's particular questions you have, please let us know, and we'll be happy to try to answer them.
I don't see any questions in the question box or any hands up at this time, but please go ahead, everybody, and if you have a question, let us know.
Okay, I'm not seeing any, but that doesn't mean they won't have any later. Would like to sort of give you an assignment, and you're probably like, what? I was told there would be no homework. But I think it's important that you take some of this back, whether you, again, use it particularly for yourself or tell others in your facility about this, because I think it's an important kind of thing to do. And I've just sort of selected a sampling of things, but I think they can be real helpful. First of all, locating the data dictionary, and actually, since we may have a little bit of time, we might be able to go show that. But there's a couple of ways at which that is done. One is got tabs on it, and it's in the order by how the data entry fields are in there. What can be useful for that is, especially for the data entry people, you have a newer person and they're trying to say, well, what the heck's the definition? Yes, we do have the definition where you can hover over it when you're doing the data entry, but sometimes it helps to just sort of have that where you can see it differently what that is. So that's all in tabs, and again, it's in a PDF and an Excel format for you. We would suggest, however, probably not a great idea to print it, partly because it's about it's very, very long, but also it's a living, breathing document, because as anything changes, like we add a new field or change a definition, it gets put in there. And if you've got a hard copy, it could become obsolete pretty readily. But I would like you to go in there. The other way the data dictionary comes is just a straight up, I usually use it in Excel, but it's got all the fields kind of running down a big list. That's where the detailed data extract information is in there, like what column is it in. It's got information on what's in the numerator and denominator for different measures if you want to know that. And the nice thing about the Excel one is you can go ahead and do filters on it if you're looking for particular information as to what is in there and where you can find it. So if you are not very familiar with the data dictionary, I would suggest you go looking for that. Another thing I would like you to do is see if you can run a detailed data extract report. For example, maybe pick a month or so and then practice the filtering and see if you can also make a simple pivot table of something that you'd like to know information about for your organization. That can be helpful. Another one is maybe just for your own edification, run one of those WISP reports, pick a month, and this would be like on the patient level detail report, and see whether or not you do have any mismatches. Again, we have built in there that a thing that says, hey, are you sure this isn't matching up? But I'm telling you what, people still seem to blow by that warning once in a while, and you can have mismatches that you weren't aware that you had. And finally, I'd say I would love to have you run a Joint Commission report, both summary and patient level, for calendar year 2016. And save that for some practice. And why I say that is, first of all, it's probably good to just see where you are at for that, if in fact you don't already know. And secondly, especially if you are planning on attending the next webinar that talks about a deeper dive into quality, we are going to be looking at some of that for the deep dive. So that would have gotten you some additional practice on that. So those are your assignments. Alan, would it be worthwhile turning it over to you to show them the data dictionary?
Yeah, the field list report. Sure.
Yeah. Eva, would you be able to change it back to Alan so he can show that, please?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I already did it, so we should be seeing.
I was going to say, you must have already done it.
All right, can everyone see? You can see my the report now, right? So as Lisa stated already, kind of what type of information is in this particular field list report. And this one's a pretty neat one because you can filter on, depending on if you're looking at particular screen, you know, like what's in the birth circumstance screen or mother screen, etc., or even within a screen, you know, you can actually filter on the group name and really narrow down some of the fields. And the big value of this is that we kind of list this based on how you navigate inside of PeriData. The other thing that's kind of nice is, as Lisa stated, is as you kind of move to the right, I'm going to freeze these panes. You could see first off, you know, what type of field is this considered required for the state? Is it required for state and hospital, or is it at the moment just not required? And then you can look at where is this particular column or this field, if you will, inside of the detailed data extract report. And this was pretty useful for me because the report, like I said, is fairly sizable in terms of number of columns. So it's sometimes pretty challenging to go find a particular column you are looking for. So this report is going to help kind of do that. This also kind of lists out the exact definition, again, as Lisa stated, the hover or mouse over that you have available inside of PeriData. This should be exactly the same type of information. And then you have the data entry usage, and this is kind of related to that. Is that the data entry usage report, Lisa? Is that correct?
It tells you what to select yes or no. If you slide down a lot further, you get to more of them. Up top, there's not that many.
Got it.
But
Got it. Okay.
like that with biliary thing I was talking about, it'll say select yes at delivery if it happened, was an indication for delivery type of a thing.
Got it.
So at the top part, there's fewer data usage things, but down below there's a lot more.
And then this column just lists out all the reports that this particular field is in or is being used in. So maybe it's not displayed in this particular report, but it would be possibly used in a particular calculation of a measure. Let's see, distinct row value. And then you got the, do you know what that one is?
I think that's more of an IT thing for if they're looking for what the name is called for the row.
Got it. And then some of the remaining ones, we list out basically every mostly every measure that we have in a particular report, and then this is where it's kind of neat, where you can actually filter on a particular column that represents a measure, and then kind of see exactly what is considered, is this field considered part of that measure, and then in what fashion is it? So is it part of the defining what's in the denominator, and that would represent a D, and if it has an N in a particular one, let's see. Let's see here. This one field right here is part of the numerator for this particular measure. And then because we find a lot of people ask questions in the help desk on, I don't understand why I have this particular score. This really helps hone in on exactly which fields are making that. And then you can then go back to your data entry screens to understand exactly, maybe that particular field did not get populated correctly, or maybe it is what it is, and now you at least understand why you got the score that you did for that particular period. Yeah, so if you just scroll through all these, then you can kind of see how each of these fields are impacting a given measure.
So for example, back on some of the breast milk feeding or something, if you're not putting in a baby's date of discharge because they're in the NICU and you think that captures it someplace else, well, it's not going to allow those to factor into your numerator and denominator because you haven't done anything with them yet. So to Alan's point, if something doesn't look right in your reporting, that's one place to go look, and maybe it is that your data entry people are consistently kind of missing a particular field and we need to remind them to put it in, or whatever the case may be. But this can be very useful for providing at-a-glance report. And now you see he's way down here further, and now in column G there, the DDE report, you're getting, like I said, the triple letters. And that was a key add-on that was very, very helpful. And again, that came through the data committee. Quite frankly, I think I was maybe one of the people that said, hey, can we get something like that? Because when I want to go find something, I'm always having to scroll around, and I kind of know where stuff is, but a lot of people probably don't. So this would be a good way to know more readily where you can find certain things. So thanks, Alan, for showing that.
Yeah, no problem.
So again, that's kind of the homework thing. And then, Alan, do you have like just the last screen is the only other thing that we have to show up? So you were given your assignments to try to take a look at some of those reports. And again, we always like to put up at the very end contact information. If you have a particular question, request, that type of thing, that the Ancilla Help Desk is a great place to go. And then also, Alan and I have our contact information on there as well if you have a specific question about the presentation or any of that type of a thing. So do not hesitate to be in touch with us. So I guess I'll open it up one last time here for any other questions or concerns that anybody might have. And hearing or seeing none, Eva, do you have any other wrap-up things?
No, not at all. Just thanking everyone for attending today.
Thank you.
Thank you.